I used to think the hardest part about owning a pool was skimming out leaves, fixing clogged filters, and keeping up with those never-ending chlorine bills. But I was wrong. The real nightmare wasn't the maintenance, it was my neighbor Karen. She and her freeloading friends treated my pool like it was their personal resort, sneaking in whenever they pleased, laughing like they owned the place. At first, I tried to be polite. Then, I tried to be firm. But when nothing worked, I decided to teach them a lesson they would never forget. And let me tell you, this time, they paid the price. When I bought this house, the pool was my dream come true. After years of grueling work and construction, saving every penny I could, I finally had a place where I could relax. A backyard with a sparkling pool, a deck shaded by oak trees, and a little corner of peace I thought would last forever. On weekends, I'd mow the lawn, fire up the grill, crack open a beer, and watch my kids splash around in the water. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. That pride didn't last long. Not with Karen living next door. Karen was notorious around the neighborhood. Early 50s, bottle blonde hair with roots always showing, and a voice that carried across the cul-de-sac like a siren. She used to be on the HOA board, until she was kicked off for being too bossy and aggressive. But she still strutted around with a clipboard and sunglasses like she was the self-appointed queen of the block. She had this smug way of talking down to people, always acting like she knew what was best. I figured if I kept my head down, nodded politely, and stayed out of her way, she'd eventually leave me alone. I was dead wrong. The first signs were subtle. I'd come home from work and notice wet footprints by the pool, even though no one in my family had been swimming that day. Towels I didn't recognize draped over the chairs. Once, I caught a faint whiff of cheap wine and perfume near the water. I tried to shrug it off until one afternoon, peeking through the blinds, I saw her, Karen herself, lounging in a tacky pink swimsuit, sipping wine straight from a tumbler like she was on vacation. My pool. My property. My rules. I stepped outside and told her directly, Karen, the pool's private. I'd appreciate it if you asked before using it. She tilted her head back and laughed. Don't be ridiculous. We're neighbors. Neighbors share. Then she waved me off as if I was some waiter bringing her the wrong drink. It only escalated from there. She started bringing friends. 3, 4, sometimes more, showing up uninvited and throwing their own little pool parties. They cranked up Bluetooth speakers, blasting Bon Jovi and country songs from the 90s. They popped open bottles of wine, scattered chip bags, and left behind empty cans. I'd come home to find inflatable rafts still bobbing in the water, half deflated and stained with lipstick. Once, I even found a soggy slice of pizza floating in the deep end. Every time I confronted her, she smirked and said, "You're being selfish. Pools are meant to be enjoyed." That word, selfish, burned me more than anything. Selfish, when I had built that deck with my own 2 hands. Selfish, when I was the one paying for the chemicals, the cleaning, the maintenance. Karen hadn't lifted a finger. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. I got home late, bone-tired from work, only to find my backyard lit up with string lights I didn't even own. Karen and her crew were throwing a full-blown night swim party in my yard. Music blasting, people grilling burgers on a portable barbecue, wine glasses clinking like it was a resort. I stormed outside, demanding they leave. Karen raised her glass, smiling coolly, and said, "Relax, we're just keeping the place lively. You should thank us." That was it. That was the moment I realized talking wouldn't work anymore. She wasn't going to stop. Not unless I made her. That night, I sat down with a notepad and began plotting. I wasn't about to call the cops. Trespassing in a pool isn't exactly a high priority. And the HOA? Forget it. Karen thrived in those meetings, twisting every story to make herself look like the victim. If I wanted this to end, I had to hit her where it hurt, her pride, her vanity, her image. I started researching pool chemicals, late into the night, scrolling through forums about what happens when chlorine levels get too high. The results were clear: itchy skin, dry brittle hair, faded swimsuits. Nothing permanent, nothing dangerous, but humiliating enough to make sure she'd never set foot in my pool again. The next morning, I went to the hardware store. Tossed a few extra jugs of pool bleach into the cart, nodded casually at the cashier, and drove home with the tools of my revenge. That evening, after my kids went to bed, I slipped into the backyard, opened the jugs, and poured them into the pool. The water still looked crystal clear, sparkling under the moonlight, but I knew better. This wasn't just a pool anymore, it was a trap. I set up my security cameras, angled perfectly to catch every splash, every scream, every moment of chaos that was about to unfold. By Saturday afternoon, it was showtime. I deliberately left the side gate unlocked, just to tempt them. Right on schedule, the cameras caught Karen and her friends strutting into my backyard like they owned it. Sunglasses, wine tumblers, tote bags, they were ready for another free day at the resort. They dove in, laughing, floating on rafts, blasting music. For a few minutes, everything was normal. Then, just as I predicted, the scratching began. One woman rubbed her arms. Another squirmed like ants were crawling on her back. Karen herself reached up and tugged at her hair, her smile fading. And then came the shriek. My hair! Oh my God, what's happening to my hair? Her blonde dye job was frizzing, turning brittle, streaks of orange and white poking through like a Halloween wig. Her friends scrambled out of the pool, coughing, scratching, shouting about burning skin and ruined swimsuits. One slipped on the deck and nearly fell flat on her face. Karen staggered out, her makeup running, her hair sticking out like she'd been electrocuted. I leaned back in my chair, watching it all on the monitor, grinning from ear to ear. The bleach had done its job, not dangerous, not permanent, but humiliating beyond belief. And the best part? I had it all on video. The fallout was immediate. Karen went into hiding for days, wearing scarves and hats to cover her fried hair. Neighbors whispered, kids laughed, and even her so-called friends kept their distance. I anonymously shared the footage with a few neighbors, and soon it spread like wildfire. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, was now the neighborhood joke. But she wasn't done. At the next HOA meeting, she tried to flip the script, standing up dramatically to accuse me of mismanaging my pool, claiming it was a health hazard. I stood calmly, pulled out my phone, and connected it to the projector. On the screen, everyone saw Karen and her friends sneaking in, splashing, laughing, and finally screaming as their hair fried in the sun. The room erupted in laughter. Karen stammered, tried to argue, but the HOA president shut her down. She was fined for trespassing and banned from community amenities. From that day on, Karen wasn't feared anymore. She wasn't respected. She was mocked, laughed at, and pitted. She tried to rally her old allies, but no one cared. She tried gossip, police complaints, even petty revenge like dumping trash on my lawn. But nothing worked. Her power was gone, stripped away by her own arrogance. And me? I finally got my peace back. My pool was clean, my backyard was mine again, and the neighborhood was free of her reign. Karen learned the hard way that boundaries matter. You can't stomp all over someone else's property and expect to get away with it forever. And when you push someone too far, sometimes, they push back harder. She thought she could take advantage of me without consequences. But now, every time she looks in the mirror, every time she hears neighbors whispering or laughing, she remembers that one day when her arrogance met its match. And that's when she paid the price.